Serendip is one of Sri Lanka's ancient names, and serendipity refers to a fortunate finding, which is a common occurrence throughout history of knowledge, product invention, and scientific discovery. Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to the Asian Development Bank's latest Serendipity Knowledge Program, which focuses on identifying knowledge solutions for Sri Lanka's development challenges. ADB established this knowledge program initiative last year in line with its vision as a knowledge bank. Previously, the Serendipity Knowledge Program had dealt with timely issues, including enabling public-private partnerships, solutions to mitigate learning losses due to COVID and the economic crisis. Today, we are all gathered at the Serendipity Knowledge Program, focusing on strengthening MSME dynamics for resilient economic growth. I'm Nistad Kasim, your host and moderator. I'm the founding editor and CEO of the Daily FT, considered among the most impactful post-war brands in Sri Lanka. We still manage Daily FT as a startup. Hence, I'm fully aware of the common problems we all face as MSMEs. Therefore, as a champion and advocacy for SMEs, as well as startup, I'm happy to be associated with this Serendipity Knowledge Program on MSMEs. Why MSMEs? It is because they account for 75% of all business in Sri Lanka. They account for 50% or more of country's economy. And more importantly, they employ 45% of the workforce. Therefore, MSME development is key to achieving inclusive growth in Sri Lanka. According to ADB, the MSME policy design has grown more challenging given the complexity of both business and the external environment. We all know how pandemic impacted the world and Sri Lanka. Yes, MSMEs were the most impacted, but there were also winners, especially those hundreds of startups that emerged in the new normal, meeting the needs of the times. Of course, in Sri Lanka, the MSMEs suffered a further shock, the ongoing economic crisis. So the Serendipity Knowledge Program today will provide an ideal platform to discuss key issues impacting the MSMEs. We will also look at the ADB's unique Asia SME Monitor service series, its key findings and how relevant for Sri Lanka. And we'll also look at some of the common issues like access to finance and policy interventions. To do this, we have several global and local experts, both physically and virtually, who are passionate about MSMEs, just like those who are in the audience in person as well as online. I'd like to welcome Mr. Chen, Country Director, Sri Lanka Resident Mission ADB, Mr. Shigeru Shinozaki, Senior Economist of the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department of the ADB, our panelist, Chaminda Patiraja, Additional Secretary to the Ministry of Industries, Mr. JPR Karunaratne, Assistant Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Mr. Ajay Rao, Regional MD of US International Development Finance Corporation, Ms. Nana Karunaratne, Board Member of the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and Mr. Takuya Hoshino, Finance Specialist of the ADB. We were to have Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Mahinda Sirivardhana, to deliver the opening remarks, but due to the visit of the IMF delegation, he expressed his regrets. Nevertheless, we have lined up a compact program, and the next 90 minutes will be a great opportunity to hear and learn from each other on the best way forward for MSMEs and through them for Sri Lanka and the overarching goal of inclusive growth. Thank you, and I kindly invite Mr. Chen to make the formal welcome address. Mr. Chen.
Thank you, Nishita. A very good morning to everyone. So first, on behalf of ADB, I welcome all of you to the fourth event of the Serendipity Knowledge Program for Sri Lanka. We want to highlight Serendipity Knowledge Program is for Sri Lanka. ADB, in close coordination with the National Planning Department, designed the Serendipity Knowledge Program, or SCOPE, for Sri Lanka. The program is designed to respond to the knowledge demands of the country. SCOPE will be the main vehicle for ADB to help the country in funding knowledge solutions. We have identified a pipeline of knowledge events, and today's event is the fourth among those. Today's topic is about strengthening MSME dynamics for resilient economic recovery and growth in the context of post-pandemic and economic crisis policy agenda. I'm pleased to see a diverse panel of experts today, representing the government, private sector, development partners, as well as ADB. I appreciate the presence of the additional secretary to the Ministry of Industries, Mr. Pasi Raja, and Mr. Karuna Ratne, Assistant Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, for taking the time in joining the panel today. We also have representatives from the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce of Sri Lanka, and ADB. I also appreciate the presence of Ms. Jeta Vimalavira, Director General, Department of Development Finance, to deliver closing remarks. Today's keynote presentation is based on a recent ADB publication, the Asia SME Monitor. For the first time, the monitor covers Sri Lanka this year as part of ADB's efforts to bring high-quality knowledge solution service to the country. I hope today's deliberations will stimulate a broad discussion on supporting this critical segment of the economy to get the reform program and put economic recovery on a strong footing. I look forward to the next 1.5 hours of sharing knowledge and inspiring ideas to take away and apply to support the MSME sector at various levels in our various capacities. ADB is formulating its strategy and approach of supporting Sri Lanka in the medium term, in which identifying and developing knowledge solutions for the country will be a key component. Finally, I wish you all a very productive session. I hope after some time, when we record this week, it's not only a week IMF visiting Sri Lanka, it's also a week we are talking about SME's role in the recovery of the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chen, for those welcome remarks. We have several people who will address us virtually, and first among them is Mr. Kenichi Yokoyama, Director General of the South Asia Department of the ADB, giving the opening remarks. Over to you, Mr. Yokoyama.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. Distinguished resource persons, ladies and gentlemen, I hope all of you are keeping safe and well wherever you are joining from, and especially our colleagues joining from Sri Lanka. The country is passing through a very difficult time and the resilience of people managing the current crisis is quite fascinating. ADB has continued to work on critical areas in Sri Lanka, and I'm happy that our knowledge works. It is heartening to see so many of you present today in Colombo, and many more joining this virtually. ADB is working closely with the government to provide emergency support at this moment. We have so far repurposed $83.4 million to import essential items, including medicines, and working capital support to MSMEs, and also facilitated $100 million. Further emergency support of $250 million is in the pipeline for board consideration in the next 2 weeks. In parallel, we are working closely with the government and development partners to lay robust foundations for rapid recovery and sustained growth that should be durable and resilient for the future. ADB Strategy 2030 highlights the importance of knowledge, as Chen also mentioned, along with finance in maximizing developmental impacts. So it's in this context that we launched the Serendipity Knowledge Program for Sri Lanka since last year, and this is a fourth event. We expect the active knowledge exchange will help enhance the quality and effectiveness of our partnership in Sri Lanka. The theme of today's forum is strengthening micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise dynamics for resilient economic growth. We are thankful to high-level officials from the government of Sri Lanka, private sector, and from international organizations who have kindly joined here today as speakers, panelists, and participants attending this forum. As all of us know, Sri Lanka is undergoing a severe economic crisis at this moment, which needs to be addressed by adjusting macroeconomic imbalances and applying structural measures to realize its growth potential. At the same time, the process should not leave behind the most poor and vulnerable segments of the population. In this context, the MSME plays a significant role, as explained by previous speakers, and also is a source of great innovations. The government has adopted national policy framework for SME development in early 2017 to articulate the policies and strategies to help MSMEs achieve integrating with local, regional, global value chains, enhance productivity, and generate more and more employments. This has been a growth model demonstrated in East Asia countries, having similar geographical, economic, and human resources characteristics with Sri Lanka. Both public and private sector of the country can play important roles to tap these great opportunities. Sri Lanka's export base remains still narrow, and its participation in global and regional value chains remains limited, although this is growing. Its SMEs need to be connected to global value chains, which will help them grow by skills and knowledge transfer from formal output buyers and input suppliers, generating more local employment and strengthening foreign currency inflow. To make this happen, we need to address key constraints, such as addressing skills gaps, promoting women's entrepreneurship, and improving the business environment. ADB has been supporting the MSME sector in Sri Lanka with a focus on expanding access to finance, supporting entrepreneurial activities, promoting product diversification, and strengthening value chain linkages. Our credit lines through 10 local banks, which are ongoing, have provided long-term financing for MSMEs growth, but also counter-cyclical support during the heights of the COVID-19 over the last 2 years. Recently, in view of the current economic crisis, we have repurposed $13.5 million under an ongoing credit line to provide affordable working capital support to MSMEs in the sectors of tourism, agriculture, and other export-oriented undertakings. We are also supporting the steps to establish National Credit Guarantee Institution for MSMEs having insufficient collateral, which is in our pipeline. Furthermore, our support aims at building an ecosystem for women's entrepreneurship development, covering finance, skills development, digital transformation, policy, and public support systems to this end. Multiple donor funds are mobilized, such as from the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative and the Government of Japan. Other development partners are also in this sector, including the US International Development Finance Corporation, who is joining the panel today, and we look forward to hearing about their work and experience. We have recently issued a signature publication titled Asia Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Monitor. This monitor provides MSMEs financial and non-financial data and analysis as a resource for evidence-based policy design for the sector. Today's keynote speaker will present findings of the Sri Lanka chapter of this monitor, and our panelists will share their views and discuss the policy implications. Today, MSME business environment is becoming more complex, and the external environment is rapidly evolving. This means policies and programs designed for MSME are becoming more and more challenging. As such, I believe today's event can provide productive dialogues that can contribute to providing integrated approaches to MSME development, which can be a critical part of Sri Lanka's economic recovery and prosperity pathway. Your engagement and feedback will also be valuable in proposing policy solutions for MSME development and building resilience into the economy. So I look forward to a fruitful discussion, and I wish you stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yokoyama, Director General of South Asia Department of the ADB, for that excellent overview and key insights. And I think it is laying the ideal platform to our discussion to follow. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Shigehiro Shinozaki, Senior Economist, Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Development of the ADB, to deliver the keynote discussion, Trends and Challenges in MSME Development in Sri Lanka, Lessons from Asia SME Monitor.
Okay, shall I start? Thank you very much and good morning. It's my great pleasure to talk about the key findings from this Sri Lanka chapter of ADB's Asia SME Monitor 2021 edition. Just hold a minute, I will upload my material first. So everyone, can you see my presentation slide? If no problem, so let's start. So in my presentation, firstly, I'd like to overview the macroeconomic conditions and the MSME sector in Sri Lanka, comparing to the neighboring South Asian countries. Then I will touch upon this result of empirical study. So that is this SME Development Index, or SMEDI, we estimated in South Asia to discuss what affected these MSME developments in the region. And then lastly, so I will discuss key issues and the challenges to revive this MSME sector with some policy implications to bounce back the Sri Lankan economy through enhancing the dynamics of MSMEs. Okay, all right. So as you see in the left-hand side, since 2018, Sri Lankan economy has been adversely affected by a series of shocks, such as droughts, constitutional crisis, terror attacks, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So thanks to these economic stimulus packages, Sri Lanka moved to this recovery stage from the pandemic in 2021. But the long-standing fiscal and current account deficit have led to this balance of payment crisis in the country. And so as you see, so inflation has risen at 16%. So in the first quarter of 2022, rising energy costs have seriously affected product supply chains and business activities, including micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. So also, as you see in the right-hand side, female labor force participation remains low at around 30%. And so unemployment rate is also high in female at around 7%. So how to involve a female workforce into business activities is a very much critical policy issue. Okay. So following these national farm classifications, MSMEs in South Asia accounted for 99.6% of all enterprises and 76.6% of the total workforce. So based on the available data until 2020. In figures here, I circled Sri Lanka in red. So whose data was available only in 2013. In Sri Lanka, around 1 million MSMEs operating with absorbing over 2.2 million employees, accounting for 99.8% of total enterprises and 75% of total employment. So almost the average of the South Asian region. So MSMEs as a driving force of the Sri Lankan economy. So revitalizing this segment is very much critical to building a resilient economic recovery. So by business sector, the average 44% of MSMEs in wholesale and retail trade in South Asia, followed by other services such as accommodation and food services, and also manufacturing. Sri Lanka follows these trends at 41% for distributive trade. So they largely serve domestic markets, with many informal. So as you see in the right-hand side, the majority of MSMEs do business outside the capital. An average 78% of MSMEs operate in rural areas in the region. So whose ratio is a bit higher, at around 87% in Sri Lanka. So fostering innovative rural-based businesses is key to strengthen MSME growth and dynamics. Okay. For MSME contribution to GDP, so overall, its ratio is relatively large in Sri Lanka as compared to other developing Asian countries based on this available data until 2020. For Sri Lanka, there was no time series data available, but the National SME Policy 2015 indicated 52% of GDP. So also MSME export data, it is not available in Sri Lanka, but there are export-oriented MSMEs, working as suppliers in global supply chains, with this Export Development Board, EDB support. So formalizing MSMEs and connecting them into global marketplaces through promoting their participation in global value chains. So would be a critical policy agenda to boost national productivity. All right. So now we look at the condition of MSME financing. In South Asia, MSME credit market is small in scale, so averaging 7% of country's GDP and 14.8% of total bank lending. So during 2015 and 2020, but it has been growing rapidly. In Sri Lanka, MSME credit market is smaller than region's average, so indicating 11% of total private sector loans and 5% of GDP in 2020. By sector, near half, 45% of MSME credit went to the manufacturing in South Asia, followed by services. In Sri Lanka, its share was a bit higher at 50.5% as of end 2020. All right. So governments and central banks in South Asia have offered several financial assistance packages to MSMEs to supplement their financing needs. They include mandated lending, refinancing facilities, special revolving funds, soft loan programs with interest rate subsidies, and credit guarantees. Sri Lanka has provided most of these measures. The centralized credit guarantee system, like the creation of a national credit guarantee institution. This is under preparation in the country, supported by ADB. So since the pandemic began, there has been significant financial support to MSMEs, including debt relief, new lending, special credit guarantees, and also minimizing regulatory burdens. So such emergency measures contributed to this MSME credit growth amid the pandemic in the region. Okay, so ADB's SME line of credit has also helped the Sri Lankan MSMEs and women entrepreneurs through financial intermediation loans and grants. So this project has been also used as a working capital financing facility to support MSMEs recoveries from the pandemic. So my colleague, Mr. Hoshino, will discuss this project in the following panel discussion. So just I'd like to show this ADB's SME line of credit performance, taking this opportunity. Okay. So the non-bank finance industry. So this remains small in scale, but gradually developing across developing Asia and helps provide working capital for MSMEs. So data for Sri Lanka include microfinance institutions, finance companies, and leasing companies. So these are non-bank finance institutions, NBFIs, regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. In South Asia, NBFI financing accounted for an average 3.2% of a country's GDP and 6.5% of total bank lending, during 2015 and 2020. So these ratios in Sri Lanka are higher than region's average, indicating 7.8% of GDP and 12.8% of total bank lendings in 2020. However, the NBFI financing has slowed recently in Sri Lanka, with increasing non-performing financing at 13.9% of total NBFI financing in 2020. So specialized SME equity markets have emerged in South Asia to help small firms access growth capital financing. So these markets are organized for qualified and accredited investors and have either concessional listing requirements or use a sponsor for listing. So in Sri Lanka, Empower Board was established in 2018. Under the Colombo Stock Exchange, which is a sponsor-driven equity market, dedicated to small and medium-sized enterprises, with easier listings requirements. So As SME market was relatively new in Sri Lanka, companies listed was only 2, so as of end 2021. But as you see in this figure, their market capitalization was relatively large, so at total $14.5 million. This is a good trend. Okay, here, let me share with you recent empirical studies to capture the structural problems on MSME development by using time series Asia SME Monitor database, which we call this SME Development Index or SMEDI. So due to the limited data availability on MSMEs, so we use the probabilistic principal component analysis, PPCA. To cope with the missing data, which are estimated by expectation maximization algorithm. So this shows this estimation results of this SMEDI in South Asia. So as you see in this right-hand side, okay, a darker red color indicates this positive and large impacts to the trend. So in the principal component. And also darker blue means negative and small impact. So explaining this, this trend of the figure. Okay. So all right, so this is the summaries of the interpretations of this SMEDI estimates. In South Asia, MSME non-performing loans in Pakistan and also stagnant MSME exports in India slowed region's MSME development after the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis until 2014. And recoveries of the capital markets in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and also improved MSME employment in India, and increase the productivity of small manufacturers in Pakistan. All these factors contributed to the recovery of South Asia's MSME sector from 2012 to 2015. And after 2016, increased MSME bank loans in India and Bangladesh, and also non-bank loans in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and increased number of MSMEs in Nepal. So all these factors supported South Asia's MSME development, after 2016. So as a lesson from this SMEDI exercise, finance is very much critical to support MSME development. In particular, gross capital delivery to MSMEs amid the crisis through diversified financing options will be very much crucial to facilitate their recovery and growth. So this is a key lesson from this SMEDI exercise we did last year. Okay. So lastly, let me take a quick look at the MSME policies in South Asia. So all observed countries, including Sri Lanka, have a long-term MSME development framework, which comprehensively cover financial and non-financial issues in line with their national development strategies. They all seek a better business environment, access to markets and finance, and skills development, business cluster development, use of technology, and special assistance for focused groups, such as youth and women entrepreneurships, startups, agribusinesses, and internationalized MSMEs. So these are very common for the MSME development frameworks in South Asian countries. Okay, in South Asia, there are comprehensive national financial inclusion strategies, most formulated during 2015 and 2021. They commonly set core strategic goals and action plans addressing digital finance and payments, and financial literacy and education, and consumer protection, and financial assistance for traditionally underserved segments, including MSMEs, women entrepreneurs, and priority sectors such as agriculture. And so most very interestingly, the Sri Lanka and Bangladesh also plan to create robust financial inclusion data for effective monitoring and policy interventions. So this is very important initiatives. So Sri Lanka leading these areas for this financial inclusion strategies. Okay. So I will skip this. All right. All right, to sum up, the findings from this Asia SME Monitor suggest that Sri Lankan economy could recover and boost its resilience to shocks by strengthening MSME growth and dynamics. So formalizing and internationalizing MSMEs with fostering innovative firms will accelerate economic recovery and inclusive growth further. So given the low labor force participation in female, promoting women's participation in business activities is a critical policy agenda. So ADB's SME line of credit is supporting women entrepreneurship to this end. Also, I could say, business development and advisory services for viable small businesses and women entrepreneurships should be strengthened further to this end. And so digitalization of MSME operations and administration is another policy priority for support. The recent COVID-19 impact study suggests that digitalization may encourage the formalization of businesses as it saves costs and also it requires more business transparency. The recent economic crisis makes it difficult for SMEs to manage operations, as everyone's already mentioned. So while promoting digitalization, assistance to reduce utility costs, like a subsidy for electricity, and to retain employees, like a payroll subsidy for workers, will be worth consideration as emergency measures for MSMEs. So I understand this budget constraint is a very big burden for doing this, but this kind of initial settings for support, providing these or some sort of the measures to easiness to use these electricity or core infrastructure. This is also the very important things. And the finance, especially growth capital financing venue, is very much critical. So for MSMEs to survive and grow. So diversified financing options are needed for viable MSMEs. More attention should be paid to market-based financing and digital finance platforms. And lastly, developing data infrastructure is key to promoting evidence-based assistance for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. So our Asia SME Monitor supports these initiatives. So data infrastructure developments in your country. All right. So for more details, please visit our ADB website, indicating here. So you can see more details analysis or technical studies related to MSMEs. Now we are covering these 15 countries, and then also this year, we include 7 more countries, and then total 22 Asian countries, practices and initiatives you can see by the end of this year. So this is just for your information. Okay, so I will stop here. So thank you very much for your attention. So any questions and any comments are most welcome from your end. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shinozaki, for that comprehensive overview on the lessons from findings of Sri Lanka chapter on the Asia SME Monitor. I'd like to acknowledge our online participants numbering over 200 right now. So I'm glad that you're still following up in the proceedings. We have an important segment right now is the panel discussion. It's my pleasure to invite 2 panelists who will be in person today, and the other 3 will be online. I'd like to invite Mr. Chaminda Patiraja, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Industries, and Nayana Karunaratna, Board Member of the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce, to please join on stage. And joining online will be Central Bank Assistant Governor, Mr. Karunaratna, Ms. Ajay Rao, Regional MD of US International Development Finance Corporation, and Mr. Takuya Hoshino, Finance Sector Specialist from the ADB. I encourage everyone, for physical participants, there are some question notes to submit your questions, please. As the country director mentioned, let's learn from each other. I like to make it very interactive. And for online participants also, there is an opportunity to post any questions. We have about 20 minutes during this discussion, and then we will take up some questions from the audience. So I hope everyone will make their own contribution to make this dialogue a success. I'll start with my in-person panelist. Mr. Patiraja, I like to, there are a lot of insights shared. Given the setbacks faced by the MSMEs and the challenges going forward, what are the ongoing measures on the part of the government in terms of policy and other support to help make MSMEs resilient?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank ADB organizers that giving this opportunity to participate this panel discussion by the Ministry of Industry. I think that for the keynote address and all these other discussions that we mentioned about the SME contribution for the industry in Sri Lanka especially. And by the Ministry of Industry as a mandated agency for the development of SME sector, the ministry has started the introduction of a national level policy for the not only aiming the industry SME but for the all industry. And then we all know 75% of industries represented by the SME. Then this national policy will mainly focused for the that will affect for the SME too. And especially that under this policy that we have already completed the draft policy document, and it's open for the public opinion. Before that, we opened the public opinion, we had some discussions with the industry, our sector advisory committees and also some of the chambers, and even the participants here and the online participants, that they can read this draft document through the Ministry of Industry website, www.industry.gov.lk. Then that we welcome your all comments, that your comments to develop the industry policy. Under this industry policy, we have identified 10 main policy principles, and all the under these policy principles that we set some goals, and also that we are going to establish introduce action plan for the national level action plan for the industry development, with the strategic plan and the action plan for the development. Among those action plan and the mainly that ministry will focus for the SME. That is one intervention. And there are some more interventions that last 2-3 years that ministry has taken initiatives, especially that ministry has published the policy framework for SME on 2015, and now that we are in we are in the process of revising, or we are in the process of amending this SME policy framework according to that considering these current scenarios, that global, that pandemic, and also our economic crisis at the moment. And SME action plan also identified and published, but that with considering this scenario, that situation, that we are also in the process of revising this with that some stakeholder agencies. And last 2 years, in 2020, end of 2020, ministry with the approval of Cabinet of Ministers, we appointed a high-level committee to identify some challenges for the SME sector, with this especially aiming the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Some all the ministry representatives from the Treasury, that I can see Mr. Manjula also here, that he is one of the committee member, and there are some committee members from the other ministries, including the Ministry of Industry, and that committee identified the challenges for that pandemic situation, especially the pandemic situation, to the SMEs, and that made recommendations to the Cabinet of Ministers and to develop the SME sector. And then Cabinet of Ministers approved those recommendations and directed Minister of Finance and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka to implement those recommendations. Some of those recommendations have already been implemented by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and also the Treasury. And then some corrective measures also have been taken in line with that the committee recommendation. That is one of a major initiative taken by the ministry, and even at the moment also that these committees, that again that Cabinet of Ministers appointed another committee to look into this problem, and that to how to support SME and also the industry sector in the country. And that committee also is going on, that government and especially the ministry, Treasury, and all these agencies, they are always looking into support that the ways and means of supporting these sectors, especially to improve the industry sectors. And also that we know, and also we heard that the study we done through about the SME sector and all, we early 2020, that the ministry has identified 9 key challenges of that the SME that related to the SME sector. And one of the major challenge of that in this SME sector is the access to finance. And that we know that the ADB, Asian Development Bank, is supporting through the Treasury and to the government of Sri Lanka to support SME to that access to find problem, access to find challenge. And also the Ministry of Industry, that under the Ministry of Industry we have 2 loan schemes introduced, the naming Smile 3 and eFriend, to support SME sector and to develop their environment, that they are towards the environmental aspects by the SME sector. It's actually a revolving fund, and that within this critical that the financial crisis situation, ministry is in a discussion with the central bank to use that the recovered amount of that fund to support SME, because that this loan scheme is a very low interest loan scheme and also very easy to access loan scheme. Then we are trying to support through this to the SME with that amount that we recovered with this revolving fund. And
Mr. Pathiraj, I'll stop you there on that. I'll just, because you gave an good entry point to our central bank Assistant Governor, Mr. Karnal, thank you very much for joining us online. I just want to follow up on what Additional Secretary mentioned. What's the central bank's assessment of the financial support that was extended since COVID, and also in terms of the resilience and recovery, particularly that the forecast for this year is a negative growth? Can I have some insights from the central bank?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hope that you can all hear me.
Yes.
I think that's a very valid question. Despite central banks' core objectives being price and economic stability and the financial system stability, central bank has been continually supporting MSME sector development throughout the history. So there are a number of MSME finance programs facilitated through our key department, which is Regional Development Department. Some of them are funded by the government, some of them are our direct funding programs to support finance for the needy sectors in the MSME group. Now, one key issue we found consequent to COVID, there was limited access to finance by these needy groups which were impacted by the formal financial sector. So central bank directly intervened with the support of government, and through our regional development department, we facilitated under three phases. We call Saubhagya schemes, phase 1, 2, and 3. Two of them are refinance schemes. One of them is a credit guarantee and interest subsidy scheme, around 176 billion rupees to more than 65,000 parties. So that was a huge support at a time where formal lending institutions were reluctant. Now, what is the reason for that? There's a major problem of information asymmetry between the borrowers and the lenders in this country, especially MSME sector. And also the formal financial institutions like licensed banks and even licensed finance companies and leasing companies, they are more towards collateralized based lending. So in this particular sector, it is very difficult to support lenders with collateral by these borrowers. So that has been a root cause when it comes to the parties affected by the COVID. So that's why I think central bank directly intervened with the support of 176 billion refinance and credit guarantee and interest subsidy. Then also there were several indirect programs through the moratoriums extended by the licensed banks and licensed finance companies. I think in the case of licensed bank, moratoriums, I think ran into around 4 trillion rupees. And also in the case of finance companies, it ran into around nearly 600 billion rupees. I can see the director on bank supervision also there, so probably more clarification can be obtained. So, but what is important is how we can address these major issues where there is limited access to finance. One is, as I already mentioned, lack of collateral, and how to promote banks and non-bank financial institutions to support lending based on cash flows. And also, from the point of view of MSMEs, how to have a proper framework for maintaining their financials. So that is the other part. So when it comes to MSMEs, the one key issue has been a lack of proper financial statements. So where we need to have a significant amount of financial literacy targeted programs. And also to use the digitalization and technology to support in this endeavor, which is very important. So I think in this context, And also the previous speaker from Ministry of Industries mentioned, while the government has taken several steps, central bank took the lead role last year with the inauguration of the national plan for financial inclusion. We called NFIS, National Financial Inclusion Strategy, which has 4 pillars, which are digital finance and payments, then MSME finance, then consumer protection, financial literacy, and capacity building. So those are the 4 components. So if you look at those 4 components, the specific component, or we call it pillar, for MSME finance. So where there are several objectives have been identified. Now, in the case of MSME finance, there are 2 key objectives we have identified under the framework. Under those 2 key objectives, there are 9 broad actions. So we are in the process of implementing those actions in line with the 2 core objectives, in particular to MSME finance. Altogether, if you take the overall NFIS, there are 26 objectives and 83 broad actions under each pillar. So along with that, I think digital payments, digital finance and payments pillar is also interconnected in this context. So especially the 2 issues I mentioned, how to improve financial literacy and how to improve their business structures, maintaining records, maintaining financial information. Especially, this is something we saw during the pandemic, where we received some applications for assessment before we approving them to provide finance through the relevant formal financial institutions, and also promote formal financial sector to lend based on cash flows. So these are the broad actions initiated by the central bank. If you give me time, I can little bit go in further with respect to 2 core objectives and the broad actions. Now, if you look at the objective 1, what is objective 1 in terms of MSME finance pillar? Build capacity of formal financial sector to scale up lending to MSMEs and expand the range of high quality products with a special focus on green and sustainable finance. This again a new goal. If you look at overall, we are also moving towards green finance framework. Taxonomy has been recently introduced. So sustainable finance is very important. So as well as vulnerable groups, including women, the poor, and the individuals with low education background. So that is the first objective. So under that objective, there are 5, broad actions. The first, support pilots for the development of innovative solutions. So one, for example, bookkeeping applications or other financial records keeping applications. So which will be very important when it comes to access to finance through formal financial sector. Then the second action is encourage cash flow based lending. And also we try to look at the avenues of movable collaterals, because still in Sri Lankan context, there's little reluctance by the formal financial institutions on movable collateral, where I hope we have a lot to do with the Securities Transaction Act. If the Securities Transaction Act comes into place, I think this could be resolved to a great extent, so that it would be a great help for these sectors to, these MSME sector organizations or individuals to access to finance through formal financial sector. And third action is...
Mr. Karunaratne, I'll stop you there. We'll come back to the other 2 aspects later on in the interest of time. Since we're talking about access to finance, we have Ajay Rao, MD of Development Finance Corporation. What are the what are the major challenges from your experience? I know you have extended some support to some of the commercial banks for lending. From your perspective, what are your findings in terms of the challenges in financing institutions to providing access to credit, Ajay?
Hello, good morning, and thank you for allowing time for the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation to speak today. Very important question, and we certainly appreciate the research that has gone in. So some of our findings are very similar. First, I wanted to give a kind of a 1-minute background on the DFC since we're new to the forum. And I'm a little bit new to the region. I moved here, 2 years ago to Mumbai, where I join you now, looking after the South Asia region, so India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Worldwide, DFC has a $33 billion portfolio, and in the region we have about a $4 million assets under management. We are here to kind of grow our portfolio in Sri Lanka, and that we've identified, many of the challenges. DFC has many of the solutions in your access to finance. Since I've been here, when I started here, we had a $20 million portfolio in Sri Lanka that has grown to over $400 million in direct loans on the back of not only 4 banks, but also direct loans to small and medium enterprises in Sri Lanka. We've supported Sanasa Bank, DFCC, NDB, and most recently, Commercial Bank of Ceylon. And our small businesses include a plastics recycling center, as well as a major fair trade food exporter. So I think rather than, I could speak to some of the challenges, but we found some of these banks that we're supporting have supported the solutions. DFC provides, long-term capital, starting with 5 years, but we can do 7 and 10 years for some companies. We provide competitive rates and more so longer moratoriums than would be available locally. And we hope that will translate when we down to the SMEs when we provide such solutions to our banks. So a couple of challenges were already identified, providing longer tenors. Looking at, I think recently there has been a greater focus on collateral. And I completely agree with Mr. Kanuratne's assessment on, looking at the cash flows. I think working capital is a major challenge for these SMEs. And so if we can look at moving away from loan against property to looking at actual business assets, looking at collateralizing inventory and receivables, that would be a solution. And we're here to support such solutions. We saw, for example, Commercial Bank of Ceylon has certain solutions dedicated for SMEs. One of them was a financial advisory service called Biz Club. A second in the digital finance called, I think it's Small Pay, or commercial banks, particularly looking at allowing SMEs to join e-commerce. So these are solutions that attracted us to the banks, as well as a willingness to lend to vulnerable populations. So in each of these loans, we require 30% to meet the 2X challenge criteria. So these are companies that are supportive of women's economic empowerment, companies that are founded by women, have a majority of women within their employees, or have 30% of women in their board structure. So that was our focus for the DFC.
Okay, thank you, Ajay.
I will pause. Yeah, I'll pause right there and back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ajay. Thank you for that insight. I'm happy that I'm getting a lot of questions. Please send it in, and also online participants also can submit their questions, and time permitting, we'll try to take as many as possible. Moving on to Nayana, we handle the aspect of access to finance, but I'd like to know from you, as being the entrepreneur in the panel, what are the real challenges the women-led businesses, MSMEs have faced, and how has the chamber helped? And when I say challenges, maybe you can prioritize the first one or two challenges and how has the chamber helped in addressing those?
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm representing the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce, a board member, and I also head the capacity building pillar. So lots of things being said here is very familiar to me because we do this kind of support for the micro and small and medium women. So work with the regional chambers as well as have our own programs. Now, I think Mr. Shinosaki very clearly explained the whole thing. Though he spoke about Asia, I think the problems are related very much to us. And Mr. Karunaratne also said about the financial issues. What I feel is that there are many problems. Financial literacy is a huge problem, and they have no see the entrepreneur, women entrepreneurs. It can be questioned, but some ladies have come into business because they like business. They are entrepreneurs. Some of them have come into business because of the dire economic needs. But either way, to start a business, it's an entrepreneur. So these entrepreneur women have hardly any complaints, and they don't harp on things. They want to do things, but there are a lot of barriers. And number one of them is financial literacy. They have no understanding of what's available, and I really don't know the reason. It could be a huge gap between the lenders and the borrowers, I think. I'm a classic example of that, which I really want to tell here. I'm supposed to be more literate and more apt, but when I wanted to build, going for a bank loan for my building, I asked for a 50 million loan. And the bank told me, we are giving you 40 million, the 10 million is a gift from us. I was very happy, but I was thinking, why should the Bank of Ceylon give me a gift? And I realized later that it was an ADB funded 10 million for me, which I didn't know. I was entitled to, but I got it. I'm very happy. But so many others don't know that. And lots of people that we work with now, the ladies, they want this knowledge, they want the opportunities. They don't want big money, they want small money, but they don't know how to access it, and they have a fear. I would also like to mention here that we checked up on this situation, wanting collateral, giving a land or something. Is there a problem from home with your spouse? And we found that majority of the ladies, the spouses, the problem they had was not protest or discourage, but they have a fear. They have a fear of getting involved in the supporting their wives with the land or the house or whatever they have. And they also mentioned that the men are a bit lazy as well when it comes to taking decisions, not physically lazy, I think it's a challenge. So this is what, where financial literacy is concerned, this is what is very important. Second thing, Mr. Karunaratne said that as well, digital knowledge we need to expand. There are so many other things that they need. They need confidence, they need business English, they need personal branding, they need to think out of the box, because these people have enough energy and they can, and every one of you have given the statistics about the contribution they make. The micro, small and medium, and the women are a big part of that. So the most important thing is, I think, people like us, chambers, associations, clubs, they all provide some kind of support, but it is one time. But these people want continuous handheld support. Whatever you do, if there is a project, we have discovered that you can't do a project and go back. You need to hold their hands for at least 12 months. Even a simple thing like if you are teaching them branding or English or marketing, it can't be one workshop. It has to be continuous support. So I think the attitude, mental capacity, and the enthusiasm is fantastic. I think we also should contribute the literacy rate of our women. We also come from a better social background that there is not much what can I say, family balancing family and business is an issue, but objections not many compared to many other countries. So I think mentoring, support, whatever the support we give, to do it on a more continuous basis, especially with all the points that were mentioned, they are very needed, would be the observation.
Okay, thanks. Excellent, Naina. I think we may have to add mentoring the husbands as a support for women entrepreneurs. Thanks. I will move on to Mr. Takuya Hoshino, the finance specialist. Again, I know ADB extends considerable support for women entrepreneurship development. What would be your advice in terms of how we can accelerate greater women-led businesses, particularly in the post-crisis recovery?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you very much for giving an opportunity to share my views on how the Sri Lankan can improve the overall system for entrepreneurship development, including women entrepreneurs. So I think the previous panelists have already clearly identified and highlighted several wide range of issues that entrepreneurs faces as of now. And ADB is fully aware that a holistic and comprehensive approach is needed to address those, wide range of issues. And I think the central bank's publication of financial inclusion strategy, that is a good starting point. And we are very happy to support the government to actually implement the action plans as the strategy laid out. And also we noticed that the Ministry of Industries also are updating the national framework for the MSME development. That is also provide a good sequential steps towards the comprehensive and robust system for MSME system. And from the viewpoint of ADB, what we can do is, of course, to provide a credit line, but also we can support the policy and the institutional framework strengthening. And we would like to encourage all the stakeholders, including banks, MSMEs, and also supporting agencies to change their behaviors. By taking advantage of ADB's financial and also technical assistance supports. So we actually started our credit line back in 2016, and we are glad to see the results of this credit line. Already more than 6,500 MSMEs are supported by this credit line, out of which 30% are women. And also more than 20% are new startups. So we saw that financial institutions gradually changing their behaviors to extend its outreaches to underserved SMEs. The question is how we can evolve this trend towards the sustainable system changes over the coming decades. And I would like to share two examples that ADB is currently working on together with the government. The first one is the establishment of SME Credit Guarantee Institution. This is a National Credit Guarantee Institution. And this National Credit Guarantee Institution will be incorporated under the partnership between the government and more than 10 financial institutions. And we understand that the Ministry of Finance and the central bank provides strong backup for establishment this NCGI. And ADB provides a technical support to ensure a robust supervisory and corporate governance framework so that this National Credit Guarantee Institution can implement efficient guarantee service delivery and also ensure the financial sustainability. And we believe that this can be achieved by the close coordination between the government and the financial institutions. That is one thing. And we strongly believe that this National Credit Guarantee Institution can also promote cash flow based lending. That is also a national agenda, as highlighted by the previous speakers, including additional governor, Mr. Karnara Tune. And secondly, we also would like to strengthen the public service delivery to MSMEs, especially in terms of the capacity building. Yes, financial literacy is important. Perhaps business development, or capacity should be improved. Market access, technology adaptation, those are all important. But continuously providing the support physically is just costly. And so we are currently supporting the Ministry of Industries and also NEDA to establish a new online platform for training, mentoring, and also networking, especially focusing on the support for women entrepreneurs. And we hope that this new online platform will be launched within a few months. And also public and private sector partners such as chambers of commerce can join in this platform so that they can also extend their own services and contents through this online platform. And also the government institutions such as NEDA, IDB, ITI can complement or supplement the support services to targeted MSMEs, including women entrepreneurs on the ground, because the still physical hand-holding support will be helpful, especially for women entrepreneurs, in addition to the support through the online platform. Finally, before closing my statement, I would like to also emphasize that ADB is fully aware of the challenges that MSMEs are currently facing under the unprecedented economic crisis. And to provide immediate support, the Ministry of Finance and ADB plan to scale up the existing working capital facility targeted for MSMEs in tourism, agriculture, and export-oriented sectors. So please let me pause here, and I'm very glad to further elaborate on ADB's support in the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoshino, for that insights. I'm going to move to questions from the audience. I've seen something, but this is I'll sort of summarize some of the questions and prioritize as well. Mr. Karunaratne, I'm sure this is the elephant in the room, purely because of the current situation. We did tackle about access to finance, but the issue now is high cost of the cost of finance with the kind of unprecedented increase. When I say unprecedented in recent context, what is central bank doing? Is the message that MSMEs have to adjust to high interest rate environment in the next 6 to 12 months, or are you promoting any alternative financing? Please share some insights, Mr. Karunaratne.
This is a very valid question. I think given the current very high market interest rate, this will be a critical problem for MSME sector, not only MSME sector, even other sectors as well. But given the high inflation, I think interest rate adjustments have been significant, so that we have to bear with it for some time. As far as I know, that there are no any other measures. I think there was a question, as you asked, that about whether interest rate ceiling on lending. There was no such measure under discussion at this moment. But even given the situation, I think we relaxed the maximum ceiling on microloans also, because the financial institutions are not in a position to lend at that given rate. So this will be a critical question that we all have to bear with for some time. But through our refinance schemes, still these borrowers can borrow at a significantly low interest rate, especially Saubhagya and the SAP. So access is available despite the commercial rates have gone up. But through our several refinance schemes under regional development bank, probably I saw in the audience there are some colleagues from the central banks also in the regional development department. So there are credit available at a very reasonable rate, but not at the previous rate, but very attractive rate compared to current market rate, especially for crop cultivation.
Okay, a quick one, a response from you, Mr. Conrad, about alternative financing. I know there is emphasis on green financing. How is central bank promoting alternative financing for MSMEs?
I think we very recently, introduced the taxonomy. With that, there's a committee overlooking this particular area. So we have been discussions with the relevant parties locally and internationally to get the support and the funding to the formal financial sector to support green finance related projects and activities with a reasonable interest cost. So that is ongoing. So it's too much, too early to comment anything on that, but it's ongoing. I think we will get the results soon. The committee is working very hard. In this particular committee, the banks and other financial institutions are represented. So we are working on hard to get some finance at very much reasonable rates, especially from overseas, to support green finance activities.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Patibaraja, there's two questions for you. I'll combine it. You mentioned about various committees making recommendations. The question from the audience is how successful have the recommendations have been in terms of implementation, and whether there is any purpose in appointing committees without fast implementation.
Thank you. Actually, that as I mentioned, and also Mr. Karat mentioned that the previously the recommendations done by that high-level committee, that most of these those recommendations have been implemented. Some of the important recommendations have been implemented. That that the extension of debt moratorium, and also that some concessionary loan schemes and some other measures taken by the central bank and the Minister of Finance. Those are the recommendations, those are the activities that taken by the steps taken by the based on the recommendations. And also that that this current situation is it's changing, that we are in a very challenging situation and the shaky situation in the country. And then that why that the government government take actions to appoint committees and all to study the current situation, and that because of this changing environment and all that the cabinet of ministers and also the other ministry and the finance ministries and other ministries, that we want the expert opinion that how to face this challenge, that how to overcome this challenge and all. That is why that they put some committees, and that I can say that that even that some organizations or some that they can't see the implementation of these recommendations and all, but that some actions that taken by the government and all these related agencies, that we can very clearly tell that those based on the recommendations made by the committees, that the committees are very much important that for the side of that to taking the policy decisions and all, that is very much important for the ministries and the high level authorities.
Okay, thank you. This follow-up question, actually, I think some of the earlier speakers, experts from the ADB did mention about value chains, global supply chains. Given the fact that there is a dire need for more exports from Sri Lanka to meet the current forex crisis, what specific steps have taken to improve the competitiveness of the MSMEs, and also this is I'm tagging along with another question in terms of improving support as well as literacy on or encouraging more MSMEs to go to export markets.
Yeah, that I will very briefly tell you that some interventions taken by the ministry, that especially that ministry is running 33 industry zones, and the IDB, under the IDB also 18 industry zones are running, and that with all the infrastructure facilities, that ministry especially that focus on the export oriented SME sector, industry manufacturing sector, when we allocate lands in that industry zones, and also that by that 2022 budget that we focus to establish another industry zone, that each industry zone for the divisional level, those industry zones also, that we are in the process of developing that industry zone. We have identified 20 locations, 20 lands to establish industry zones. Most of these industry zones that made basically for the export oriented industries, that we are allocating lands for the export oriented industries.
Just I know BOI markets the FTEs, and they have a percentage of how exports done by the FTZs. Do you have a number which talks about IDB driven estates? How much of exports are they doing? There's a figure or a percentage?
Actually, under the Ministry of Industry, that the export oriented industry, that there are that altogether, that I'm talking about the Ministry of Industry, that we have 33 industry zones, that we under those industry zones, nearly 420 industries are running on. Out of those 420 industries, nearly 100 to 125 industries are export oriented, or the indirect supporting to the export industry, especially that that packaging industry. There are lots of packaging industry factories are in the zones. Those packaging industries indirectly support to the export industry. Then in sense of that, more than 100 industries located in the industry zone. And one important point I want to highlight, that Ministry of Industry and the NEDA, National Enterprise Development Authority, we have introduced a trade portal called Made in Sri Lanka. That Made in Sri Lanka is mainly focusing to the small and especially the micro and small medium industries, to give them the market access, local and also the international market access. That registration under that Made in Sri Lanka trade portal is at the moment free, that because for the first 1 or 2 years that we are focusing to support industries, giving them the registration opportunity free of charge. They can create their business center in that Made in Sri Lanka trade portal, and also we have established the international payment gateway and the courier service, that it's identically that working with that other the famous trade portals, that Alibaba or that any other trade portals. And therefore that actually that for the participants here and also the participants in this online participating, that I encourage that all these the industry sector organizations, that especially the manufacturing industries, to utilize the facilities created by the NEDA and the Ministry of Industry to enhance their market opportunities.
Thank you. For the benefit of the physical participants, the interesting finding of the ADB Asia SME Monitor can be downloaded by using the QR code, which is on the printed material that was provided to you. It will be available, also posted online for online participants to make use of it. I think that's a good snapshot. Rather than reinventing the wheel, the Sri Lankan stakeholders can basically take some of the key recommendations and start implementing. Of course, there were some key suggestions made earlier on, so maybe that might be useful. I'll take a few questions.
Mr. Can I add one more comment on this previous
Right,
question? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned about this value chains, right? So I think Central Bank of Sri Lanka this year initiated an important project that's called Domestic Agriculture Development Project, which is a value chain project, which brings all three parties from the producer, lead player, and the financial institutions and the market to one forum. So where we have allocated rupees 1 billion under three areas. That is, one is dairy, then vegetables, and the spices, which includes both domestic and export markets related entities. We have already dispersed more than 300 million, identified 10 lead players, so which is ongoing. I think ADB has indicated, depend on the success of this project, they would support from the next year. So that is one important element. Again, with respect to your previous question on the interest rate, I think we have 6 regional offices where any MSME can get information about these refinance schemes and other related schemes, which are available at concessionary rates. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that intervention. Quick question to ADB actually. Since it's challenging task for commercial banks to extend financial support for MSME, can the ADB allocate more funds through the banking system? That's a question for Mr. Chen. And also, I will bring in Ajay into this question as to what factors would compel DFC to sort of partner more banks in channeling more financing. Maybe Mr. Chen, if you'd like to respond on whether there'll be, I know it's 2 questions from the audience. There was reference about some 45 million emergency financing.
Thanks. Yeah, okay, thank you. So this is really a billion-dollar question. It's not about whether we want to support or not. I think this can be definitely confirmed. We want to support to the extent possible, but the country is facing such an unprecedented economic crisis. We needed to see some clarity. So what we are doing now is to provide a package of emergency assistance by repurposing funds from already committed loan. Earlier, our Director General and also Takuya mentioned we have repurposed 13.5 million to support the working capital for the SME. And there are several discussions ongoing at this moment, which I can confirm. And we needed to actually continue the work together with the government, the central bank, as well as other stakeholders in this exercise to decide how to proceed. I will see the challenge is tremendous, but not insurmountable. We hope we can find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chen. Ajay, you'd like to sort of respond as to, we have a couple of bankers as well in the audience, as to what factors would sort of encourage you to increase your portfolio in Sri Lanka?
Certainly. So we're interested in supporting Sri Lanka expand in healthcare, agriculture, and also further in financial inclusion. We've done a lot of work with commercial banks, Sri Lanka, and we're looking to deepen the financial ecosystem. So looking at non-bank financial companies with either specialized products, specialized for particular sectors such as electric vehicles, agriculture, or those that are specialized for particular regions, outside of Colombo, looking at more rural regions. I think the challenge there is finding NBFCs with acceptable non-performing assets ratios. So that's we're on the lookout for some of those transactions. But in the meantime, we will continue to look at direct loans to operating companies in the priority sectors mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Karnaratna, just one final question to you. Everyone mentions about the need for collateral, and that there is also focus on credit guarantee scheme. But isn't that the case where central bank requires the banks to insist on collateral first before lending? Is there a change? I know you mentioned about cash flow based lending and all that, but how quickly can you sort of get it rolling out at actually rural area level?
I don't think there is any regulatory requirement for entities or the formal financial institution obtain collateral. I think the very basic principle in lending is not the collateral. Anybody who learn, credit, the first principle is lend based on the cash flows. But the collateral is the second source of, security. Okay, so that's the comfort any formal institution giving a loan to a customer. Okay, I don't think there are any specific requirement as such, but it's up to the institutions to look at this aspect as well. So as I mentioned, under this objective 2, this is one action that with the support of formal financial institution, we are engaged how we can promote cash flow based lending. But the critical factor is to do that, they need to ensure that the relevant MSME sector institutions are maintaining proper records. So that is the key obstacle. So if we can achieve that objective, where we can, through the financial literacy and other help under these separate actions and objectives, which we are initiated and ongoing. So definitely this will help the MSME sector entrepreneurs or the individuals to have proper framework, financial records maintenance framework, which will help the formal financial institutions to support credit based on cash flow. And also other aspect of what I mentioned about movable collaterals. They have some collateral, but not what is formally required by the banks like land and building. But so that again, they need some comfort, So once this Securities Transactions Act come into effect, definitely I think this will support. I think someone mentioned about this, receivable portfolio. Probably that is something that acceptable. So that we need to ensure the banks could rely, formal financial institutions could rely on that. So I think with those, I think probably we can, move gradually into cash flow based lending.
Okay, thank you. Let's hope that if we do have another session on SME, MSMEs, the need for collateral will be at the bottom of the list and not in the top 5. That's a sort of a benchmark. Maybe we can move on. Time to wrap it up. So, but in terms of the panel discussion, I'll give the last word to Nayana. What keeps you hopeful in terms as you being a MSME as well as someone who champions and supports? What sort of inspires you to? Do you see hope, and what factors drive that hope?
I am always very hopeful, and working with these micro-level women, I'm very proud to say that they are also very hopeful and enterprising, very positive. There was a question about what the setback of COVID-19 was. As I told you, none of them complained obviously everyone would have suffered. Nobody said, oh, this happened with COVID-19. So that I think is a major plus point. But everything was touched today by all of you, and even regarding the exports, because we did some programs for exports. The micro level people are dying for export, to do exports, but they have few problems. One is maintaining the quality. Second thing is exposure to the international market, because we are very old fashioned and traditional, and we are not innovative enough. The next thing that we found is that the little fellows will first supply to the export houses, right? So they can't export direct, but they don't know to manage quantity. They can make 10 items perfectly, but they cannot make 100 items in the equal standard. So those training. Then of course every micro lady also has a smartphone. She doesn't know how to use it. They all want to go to Alibaba, Daraz. They want to go to all the Kapruga, but they don't know how to. And I think the opportunities are huge. They have fantastic products. So that is also another aspect along with the finance to support them with the knowledge, market exposure, branding, and digital or rather smart using the internet. All that needs to be done. But again, I like to repeat, please, to whoever is involved, don't make it one workshop. It has to be a continuous one where you support them with that one subject, but continuous.
Okay,
Thank
excellent.
you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the physical audience as well as the online audience for making it very interactive. I mean, I think the purpose was achieved in terms of an exchange of ideas and comments. So thank you very much for that input, and also for the panelists for making it very insightful, and they deserve a round of applause from the physical audience, actually. Thank you very much. To wrap it up, I'd like to invite Ms. Geeta Vimalavira, Director General of Department of Development Finance, to give the closing remarks. And I believe Mr. Subayashi Mistra, Director Public Management Financial Sector and Trade Division South Asia Department of the ADB, would also do an online closing remarks. So over to you, Mrs. Vimalavira.
Good morning. Good morning, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am privileged and honored to deliver closing remarks on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka in this valuable knowledge enhancement program organized by ADB. This is a timely organized forum on a very important topic because SME have been recognized as the driven force of the new development journey, as Mr. Shinosaki explained in his keynote speech today. And it is stated in the policy framework of the government of Sri Lanka as well. It is also accounting for the majority of enterprises, the labor force, and eventually the contribution to the GDP. The contribution of contributory figures for the GDP are closely reported and clearly reported in the SME Monitor, today explained by Mr. Shinosaki. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Asian Development Bank, both on my own behalf and on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, for its partnership and continued support extended over the past few decades to develop the SME sector through not only through financial support but also through non-financial supports. ADB has also made prompt responses to the government's requests in emergency situations such as in COVID-19 pandemic and prevailing economic crisis. As the Director General of the Department of Development Finance, I have personally witnessed the significance of ADB's contribution in assisting SMEs in Sri Lanka to overcome their difficulties. We greatly appreciate ADB's support and hope to continue working closely with you in the future as well. During the 2 hours we spent here today, The participants of this program discussed the lessons learned from the Asia SME Monitor, the trends and challenges in MSME development in Sri Lanka, and how to overcome the obstacles created by the pandemic and the current economic downturn. Due to the present economic situation in the country, a number of important development programs that expected to be funded by ADB have been held up. In addition, I recall that several development programs that were to be funded by other development partners have also been delayed due to this economic situation. We hope all these initiatives will be expedited by ADB and other respective donors. Then we will be able to get their benefits to overcome the current critical issues in the economy. I would like to thank the ADB team personally at this moment, Mr. Chen Chen, Country Director of the Asian Development Bank, Mr. Kenichi Yokohama, Director General of South Asia Department, Mr. Shinigaro Shinosaki, Senior Economist, Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department, Mr. Takuya Hoshino, Finance Sector Specialist, and all other ADB members for organizing this Serendipity Knowledge Program and providing a good platform for all stakeholders to discuss the various aspects of MSME development. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the keynote speaker, Mr. Shinosaki, and all the panelists from public and private sector institutions, Mr. Chaminda Patiraja, Mr. Ajay Rao, Mr. J.P. Karunaratne, and Ms. Nayana Karunaratne for their insightful contributions to the discussion and for sharing their knowledge on national efforts to scale up MSMEs during the post-pandemic and economic crisis period. I appreciate the comments made by all participants representing various donor agencies, government institutions, private sector agencies, chambers, and others by contributing ideas to make this national event successful. Without taking much time, I would like to conclude my closing remarks. Thank you very much for your thoughtful consideration. I hope that this program is the first step in establishing a platform for the Asia SME Monitor, strengthening the dynamics of MSMEs in Sri Lanka, enabling to overcome the issues of current economic downturn in the country. As others suggested, we hope to continue this. Thank you so much.
Mr. Mitra, you can also give your closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Let me thank first the government of Sri Lanka and the Sri Lanka Resident Mission of the Asian Development Bank for organizing such a very captivating, discussion. Let me begin by echoing what my colleague Takuya was, hinted, is that, we are very glad to see the approach taken by the Department of Industry and the central bank, where, the upgrading of the MSME policy and situating that within the industrial policy framework. Because after all, the MSMEs, the micro and the small enterprises can only thrive if the, overall ecosystem for the larger industries are strengthened. And that's extremely important. That's how the national value chain is developed and strengthened. That's a very, very heartening, development, very positive and encouraging. And secondly, what Mr. Karunaratne talked about, the initiative in the agriculture sector for value chain financing, that's also an extremely important, particularly in the context of Sri Lanka post-crisis. Where we know the impact on the agriculture sector that has happened. And that's why we moved in with the working capital requirement for the agriculture sector by repurposing some of our portfolio. Now, if I summarize the discussions, broadly today, like any discussion on the MSME sector, of course, there was this access to finance, including credit guarantees, insurance, and of course, the other was on the access to technology. But one point I want to mention here is access to technology is not just for improving the competitiveness
and also for payment solution, but access to technology can also be to reduce the cost of funding. And we have seen some excellent, innovative programs being done across the world, including, in the neighboring countries like Bangladesh and India, where, focus is on through these, digital platforms, both for internal, within the financial institutions as well as to the entrepreneurs, where it's not just collateral, but collecting, large amount of data with respect to enterprises. And, and basically what it does is, the issue is here, why do the large financial institutions are a bit risk averse, because they cannot sometimes assess the credit risk. But what today it allows, if we capture the kind of data, not just collateral, but receivables, warehouse receipts, plus others, on the utilities, phone bank phones, others, bank receipts and others, we should be able to generate a score which then can be used by entrepreneurs to access, certain banks or financial institutions through the same platform. So technology can also be harnessed to lower the cost of funding, in a larger way, which we are seeing already happening through very innovative programs. The other is, of course, we didn't talk about it, is of course, we talked about access, facilitating access to markets, policy, governance, ease of doing business, human capital, knowledge dissemination, and the common facility infrastructure. But other important point, and perhaps the only point, because we have exceeded our time, I want to focus on the aspect of sustainability, particularly the impact or that small, and medium enterprises can have on the climate part of it, on the climate change, because it is the backbone of the economy. And many of these small micro entrepreneurs will not have the capability to, to adopt, energy efficient, because of the cost that is there, energy efficiency, energy efficient technologies, in terms of, because what we can do is through common facilities, we can allow them to access these, and this can also be done through cluster financing rather than each institution going through that. So sustainability is a very important fact, accessing green finance, green energy, renewable energy, and others. So I think if that should also be kept in mind when we're looking at any policy framework for MSMEs actually. So let me stop here and once again thank the organizers and particularly the panelists for a very enriching discussion. And we hope we can continue to engage, particularly policymakers and our development partners who are present in Sri Lanka, to make the MSME sector in Sri Lanka competitive and highly sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mishra. That was Director Public Management, Financial Sector and Trade Division of the South Asia Department of the ADB. Thank you very much, Mrs. Vimala Veera. Thank you very much for the audience as well on behalf. And refreshments and are served outside. Maybe we can continue to network and share knowledge. So thank you very much and have a good day.